So welcome back to the channel. Shelby here with my boy Jesse. We are still working on this Mustang GT. Found a couple problems with it when we were doing a test drive, and essentially I need to know if I'm going to be able to fix this car or if I'm going to have to part it out. So as y'all know, when I discussed it before, it was supposed to be a flip car. When I test drove it, I was hearing some noises coming from the transmission, and I believe we might have a cracked flex plate, but until we actually pull the transmission, we won't know. So, all right, there's a car. We're gonna go ahead and start working to pull the transmission out of this thing, and then hopefully we just have a flex plate or even a loose bolt or something like that, and we'll go from there. If we see any more detrimental problems, we'll probably end up just parting this car out. Oh yeah. You see that bolt right there? Yep. Definitely need to look at removing this transmission, and then we'll go from there. So first thing we're gonna have to do is disconnect everything up top, and then once we get everything up top done, we can start working on pulling the drive shaft out, and then disconnecting the transmission from the motor, and then pulling it from there.
MGJ Production.
Alright, so I went ahead and got started on this. Might have got a little overzealous and disconnected the shifter cable, or the shifter up there. It's my first automatic that I've ever done. Didn't really do any research on it, so I just kind of started going after it. Looks like that doesn't even matter. All you really got to do is disconnect this nut and get it out of this bracket. Might just be able to pull these two bolts up here to get to it, and then everything on the top side is actually done. Then we'll go ahead and remove the drive shaft bolts. There's 4 of them. Should be able to freely spin. I got it in neutral now, so you can just take those out, and you'll be able to pull this drive shaft off. There will most likely be transmission fluid that comes out of there, so we'll have a little catch pan or something that I put under there. We'll see. And then you got bolts on the top there, which is pretty difficult to see. You won't be able to see it right now, but we're going to go ahead and loosen up the motor mounts on both sides to be able to allow the motor to kind of wobble a little bit. And then when we disconnect this trans cross member, we will go ahead and put our handy dandy jack under it, and then we'll start lowering it. And once we lower it, the motor and everything should tilt a little bit like this. We should be able to get those top bolts out. So here's to hoping anyways. we got the transmission out, hanging out over here. And I think we definitely found our problem. Let me turn the camera around, turn the light on here. So if you look at this flex plate, these bolt holes, or these notches, those are supposed to be bolt holes. And those are what attach the flex plate to the torque converter. So your torque converter uses these studs, and then that flex plate just sits on it and is bolted to it, utilizing some, I believe they're 14mm bolts. So what I assume was happening was those bolts were loose, which I know they were. There was one of them that I could almost turn by hand, almost, and it just wore that out. So that flex plate, or that torque converter, every time it would go into gear position, it would just rattle around for a couple seconds. And also that starter was causing some problems too. So a couple things about this that I didn't share with y'all earlier that I noticed quickly getting into it was the exhaust was in the way, and this one has been custom rigged, so you can't just pull the mid pipe out of it. Just as well, we had the transmission oil cooler lines that were in the way, the starter obviously that was in the way, and then at the top of the transmission there are 2 bolts. So right here and right here, in order to get those out, you have to really do some magic. Yeah, I know, it's not impact rated, sue me. Maybe one day, once we get going along here. But besides that, the rest of it was pretty simple, pretty easy to get done. And then once you got all the bolts out, it was just a matter of putting a strap on it, and then just had to wiggle the back side of it for a little bit, and then it just popped off. So pretty simple to get it out. So now we're going to go ahead and get a new flex plate, get it replaced, and I don't know what I'm going to do yet about the bolts. Obviously get new bolts and nuts, or maybe just nuts, but I don't know if we're going to Loctite them or what we're going to do. I have to do some research on that end, but yeah. Alright, so we're back. It's a few days later. I had to order a new flex plate. So again, as you see, the bolts in this one, or the flex plate itself, was worn out by the bolts and nuts bouncing around. So we're going to go ahead and replace it with this one. We'll be bolting right here, right here, right here, and right here. And then we went ahead and got new nuts and some Loctite. So one of my biggest questions that I had with this was why there are no locking nuts or locking washers on the actual torque converter bolts. And I'm talking with one of my buddies who's a ASE certified mechanic, which I am not anymore. He said that according to Ford spec, they're just supposed to Loctite those bolts down and then torque them down. So that's what we're going to do. I went ahead and got the high strength Loctite, so we will torque these down and get this car back up and running. The only concern that I really have is getting those upper bolts in there. So see right up in there, getting those bolts is going to be kind of a pain, getting it all lined up and everything. So we're going to have to take our sweet time and just make sure that we do it right. I could have potentially gotten away with just replacing the nuts on this and maybe putting some washers, but even though it's not going to be my car, I still want it to be done right. So once we get all this bolted up, we'll put some transmission fluid in it, make sure that everything's good to go, and then we will probably be replacing the actual transmission fluid and filter pending no problems. And then we'll get on the next thing. I noticed that there's quite a bit of power steering fluid that's gunked up underneath. It was low on power steering fluid when I got it. So I thought that I might have found out the problem, but I don't think so. I think it's actually seeping from the power steering reservoir. So we'll have to look into that afterwards. But that's another time. We will go ahead and get started on this. Alright, so transmission is mounted. Let me turn my light on here. Got all the bolts going up. And I don't know if you can see back there, but those two bolts are also in. So I didn't skip any. Next, we're going to put those nuts in Loctite on these bolts and go all the way around, snug them up, and then I got to look at the torque spec for them, but we'll see about torquing them, see what happens. And then I'm gonna probably try to get this exhaust on. This was a pain, as you can see. The catalytic or the H pipe or whatever it comes with factory, X pipe, whatever it is just welded into these mufflers. So it was difficult to get off. So I'm pretty sure it'll be just that much more fun to put on, but we're well on our way. This next process of getting this torque converter bolted to the flex plate is probably going to take a while. So when we return, hopefully that'll be done, and I will have hooked up some more stuff as well. All right, so we got everything done last night. Going and taking it on a test drive this morning. Also got to pick up some gas for my zero turn. So we're gonna go take this on an errand, see how well she performs. Go from there. So one thing I noticed right off the bat is that the little shifter selector is not going, it just stays above park. I don't know, maybe that's something in the shifter. I shouldn't have taken that out in hindsight, but not a big deal. Runs pretty good, shifts through the gears pretty good. I'm actually getting pretty tired of working on this car. I did want to do a whole bunch more stuff to it, but I think I'm just going to try to post it up for sale and throw it up in the yard and see if it gets any bites. I'm in it right at $250. So I'm in the car at about $1,250 total, which, you know, it is what it is. I definitely think I can get more than that for it. I got the title and everything, so, and it runs and drives just fine. Actually, I thought the shocks needed to be replaced. They probably do in the back, but it's really not that bumpy of a ride. I think that maybe turning a little bit, you can feel a little flex in there. But I did also find a loose sway bar mount while I was doing that, so I just tightened that up as well. I don't really believe it does too much on a stock vehicle, but it could be. So it is what it is. But yeah, it runs and drives just fine. Got a little light brake pedal feel, but shifts through the gears. As far as, you know, replacing that flex plate, I think we did a good job. I'm definitely going to go back and retorque everything. So retorque the drive shaft bolts, retorque the actual flex plate bolts, and then the mounts, the transmission mount as well. But yeah, she runs pretty solid, so I'm happy. Alright, until the next one, guys, take care, and like and subscribe for